Hey everyone, it's Rob Adams of the Actors Workshop back for another episode of In the Abyss. And as promised, I got through 5 more movies. So I'm on my way to my quota of at least 15 because I can get through 5 more next week. When I do these videos, part of it is so you guys can hear about movies that maybe you've never heard of or that you have heard of but haven't watched and be able to watch these movies and enjoy them. But also, they're acting lessons. There's things in these movies that can help you with your acting. And it's funny because when I watch these movies, there always seems to be some kind of theme. And if you look back at last year when I did the horror films and even last week, there was some kind of theme that hit me. So, what kept hitting me watching these 5 films this week is the eyes, the eyes, the eyes. It really stood out. And what makes the eyes so powerful is the beliefs, right? I was going to say the belief system, right? But, that's the best way to think about it, is that these actors have a belief system. The situation they're in is real. So they're working from within, which reflects the eyes. When you work from the brain, it causes the eyes to be flustered or thinking and blinking, all that stuff. But when you work from here, that's what makes the eyes strong. That's what makes it solid. That's what makes it conviction, right? And so when I was watching these movies, that kind of became the theme of how powerful the eyes were. And you also have to remember, in these older films, before technology, before green screen, before all the stuff where they could create things, they had to shoot live, in a sense, right? And so it was angles of shots, shooting the villains up to make them look bigger and stronger, shooting the other people down to make them look smaller, but also the way they shot the face and made sure that the eyes were powerful with lighting and all of those different kinds of things. And if you don't have strong eyes, it doesn't work. It doesn't matter what kind of lighting or camera angles you make, right? Or take. But if you are strong in the eyes and you have that light stream across, right? Or if you take a certain angle, it makes those eyes really, really strong. And that, like I said, was the theme all the way through these movies, which made it really fun to watch. And it made an easy theme to be able to talk about today. So we'll start off with my Vincent Price of the week. And it is The Fall of the House of Usher. And even if you look at the Blu-ray cover, look at the eyes. Vincent Price, and we talked about him last week, was the master of horror films. And he believed in everything he did and made that a reality. And he was such a unique personality in the way he was and the way he sounded and the way he behaved, that because he was so comfortable at being the situation he was in, he always came across and always came out as Vincent Price. And it always worked. And it doesn't matter what he was. He always had that eerie feeling. He always had that, he just seemed creepy without being creepy. And this story, he actually plays, he plays a guy who kind of comes across sympathetic, but at the same time, he has a motive of what he needs to do. And that's a justification we were talking about last week, right? He's justifying his actions because it has to be done, not because he's a bad guy. And that's what makes it work. It's really good. Last week we talked about The Haunted Palace. This one's really good. We actually have one more Vincent Price that I did this week. These movies are really fun to watch, and I love them. I love that old school Technicolor. I love the old school locations. I mean, this is basically in one house. Another, it's in the House of Usher, and it just works. I highly suggest it. And once again, the power is in the face. It's in the eyes. The second one I did was a Criterion. It's called The Uninvited. This was 1944. And this is actually the first film where the people interacted with ghosts. Leading up to these kinds of movies, any kind of film that had to do with ghosts, it was just people talking about ghosts. It was about people referencing ghosts, but never interacting with ghosts. This film, they actually interact with the ghost. Once again, it's done in a couple locations, but the base of it is, of course, in a house. And the way that they did it for this period of time was super cool. And what I love about Criterion is taking these old films and restoring them. You know, it's funny. The movie starts and it starts with the ocean going, and it was kind of blurry. And I'm like, wow, man, this is unlike Criterion. But as the film got going and you started to see people, the clarity and the restoration is so good and so clean. And you know, it's interesting because there's a couple actors in here that are in the film that I really don't know who they were for that period of time. But once again, so simple, so strong in the eyes. And part of the reality of what makes the ghost story work is their belief in dealing with the ghosts. And it makes for a fun story, a great movie. I highly recommend it. If you can watch the Criterion version, not just the movie itself, but the Criterion version, you'll really, really, really get the essence of how that film was restored. It's really good. Next up, and I just brought out I have the Abbot Costello box set. This is the third set. This is discs 11 through 15. Abbot Costello meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Abbot Costello had a shtick, and they were really good at it. They did a great job of playing off each other. They had a really good job of being the straight man and the funny guy. And then you add in all of these different elements, and it made for a good comedy. Even though the shtick was very similar from movie to movie, it never got old because they were so good with it. And very similar to other movies they did, Meet Frankenstein, Meet the Mummy, etc. In this one, they meet Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And what I love about it is Dr. Jekyll is played by Boris Karloff, you know, one of the original Universal monsters. He played Frankenstein, he played the Mummy, just a classic actor. So you take a guy who has that kind of being, if you will, and you make him Dr. Jekyll, who turns into Mr. Hyde, along with Abbot Costello, and it makes it really fun. And what makes it work is it's their reality. This is really happening. This is not, let's make fun of this and be funny and blah, 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 blah. This is real. This is happening. This monster's on the streets killing people and not realizing it's this very friendly, likable doctor who's turning into him. And that just makes for a really cool story. Boris Karloff, legend. You know, I don't know how good of an actor he was or wasn't, but I do know that he was really good at Boris Karloff. And you know, even when you hear that song, The Monster Mash, I don't know how many people know this, but Bobby, I think his name was Bobby Pickett, I think, who did The Monster Mash. But he called himself Boris because he wanted to sound like Boris Karloff. So when he sang in kind of that voice of Boris Karloff. So when you listen to Boris Karloff and then you listen to the Monster Mash, you hear that. And it's kind of like last night we were talking about in class about Hotel Transylvania. When Adam Sandler's doing Dracula, he's emulating Bela Lugosi, right? These legends of Universal monsters really created and paved the way for how we see these classic monsters. So when you have a guy like Boris Karloff playing a different role, even though it's not the Frankenstein monster or the Mummy, he's still playing Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. There is that fear of it because he's so good at what he does. All right. Oh, which by the way, it caused me to buy the original 1920 silent film, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde with John Barrymore. This, by all accounts, is a classic. I'm not that much into silent films, but when it comes to the horror films, the 4 silent films I have a couple Chaplins, of course, and Criterions, but when it comes to the horror films, I have The Phantom of the Opera, Nosferatu, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and then The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which I don't know is a horror film as much as it is a love story, but it kind of connects with that. And that's it. The classics. Other than that, I'm not doing the horror films. I mean, the silent films. I'm always going to do the horror films. Anyways, the next one I did was John Carpenter's The Fog, Jamie Lee Curtis, and actually Janet Leigh, her mom, who of course was famous from Psycho, Jamie Lee famous from Halloween, and then Adrienne Barbeau. this was Carpenter's follow-up after Halloween, a different type of horror film, and you get that feel for a Carpenter film, music-wise, shot-wise, movie-wise. Definitely not the story that Halloween was, and definitely did not take off like Halloween, but you see elements in the story, and you can kind of see it here with the ghost, of kind of where Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl kind of got a little bit of their ideas. I'm not saying it's a complete ripoff, and it is a different story, but you can see elements when watching this where you sit there and go, kind of reminds me of this. And like I said, this is a B movie. I don't mean like I'm grading it as a B. It's good. The acting's good, as you can see once again. The eyes are strong. The belief is strong. And Jamie Lee Curtis doing Halloween and doing movies like this, she's so good at living in the reality that she's dealing with what she's dealing with. And that's what makes it work. That's what makes it so good. And you can see it right on the cover. This is the second time I'm showing you a cover, and you can see it in the eyes, right? But an interesting story. Basically takes place over 2 days. And it was fun to finally watch this because I've owned it for a while. It actually was still in the wrapping when I opened it just the other night to be able to watch it. Finally was able to view it, and I did enjoy it. And like I said, I like Carpenter. I like his work, especially his early stuff. And it's well done. Like I said, it's a fun October suspense thriller horror film. Give it a shot. So then after watching that, I decided to watch one more on the same night, and I went with Vincent Price's House of Wax, another one that's more of his legendary ones. I mean, the ones that most people have heard of is House of Wax and House on Haunted Hill, and mainly because those were remade, but you can't beat the classics. And actually, this was a remake of a 1933 movie called The Mystery of the Wax Museum, I believe is what it was called, which is included in this package. This is a DVD, yes. I have since purchased it on Blu-ray. Hopefully we'll get that in the next couple of days. But this may be one of the top 3 Vincent Price movies, in my opinion. It's terrific. It's really well done. He is phenomenal in it. The acting is good. The one girl, unfortunately, she's not in it too long, is a bit annoying. She has this awful giggle that is extremely annoying. And maybe they did that on purpose. Maybe they wanted us to not like her, so when she disappears, we're okay with it. I don't know. But other than that, I mean, it still comes down to Vincent Price. And there's some really good moments in this film. And he's so good and classic in the film. Like I said, maybe even top 3. It's just a really good, enjoyable film. He's terrific in it. The story is terrific. It's really cool. And it goes back to the days of wax museums. And I don't know a lot of people if they even know what these are anymore. But when I was a kid, down the street from Disneyland was the Hollywood Wax Museum. And you could go there and you'd walk through, and you would basically walk through history in these figures made of wax, and it almost made them come back alive. It was kind of cool to see that reenacted parts of history. And at the beginning of this, when you walk through his house of wax, you see moments in time reenacted with these wax figures, and they kind of take you through it, and it's kind of neat. If you know me, I love that kind of history. I love the people in history, and the wax figures make it come alive and made it come alive. And I just don't think people have that interest anymore of seeing and watching that kind of stuff. And I think it's a lost art. I think it's a lost opportunity, but it's a product of the times for sure. But I definitely think this is a must watch. A lot of times I recommend movies, hey, check this out or whatever. This is a must watch. I think you have to watch it and really enjoy how good filmmaking was. And once again, that Technicolor, that period of time, and the acting. And another interesting thing was this was actually a 3D movie at the time. And on the Blu-ray, it is 2D and also 3D if you have a 3D TV. And so you'll see shots that they're doing to give you that 3D, but not cheesy shots. Just simple ones that would be shots of something coming at you, which is kind of cool. Whereas later 3Ds, they tried too hard to give you that, and it's too much. This was simple. It just once again goes back to a simpler time in filmmaking, more about trying to create a reality and having fun and not making these movies super long, right? Today's day and age, way too much. We've talked about it, but like I said, a must watch. And then the last one we did this week, Rachel, my youngest daughter there, she wanted to watch some of the old monster movies, which she's never seen. So her first choice was Dracula. Of course, I've seen it many, many times. I'm a big fan. As you can see, I'm wearing it. Love Bela Lugosi on the back. Once again, trying to get you that angle. It's in the eyes. He was Dracula. He is the model of Dracula. If you Wikipedia Count Dracula, his picture comes up. When you watch people do cartoons and all that kind of stuff, they emulate Bela Lugosi. He is, even though he did other roles and he was in other movies, and if you go back to last year, you'll see several non-Dracula movies of his that I watched and I own that are great. Ultimately, he was typecast as Dracula. That's who he was, and that was the image. And so if you put him in stuff like, what was the one last year we watched? If I can find it. Oh, The Return of the Vampire, right? Even though he is not Dracula in it, he plays a vampire. And so they would play on that image a little bit. And I think it was smart. I mean, that's who he was. And so much that he believed in it. Last night in class, we watched some clips from Dracula, and you really see his belief system, and it comes through in the eyes. It comes through in the body language. It comes through in the behavior. He was Dracula. So much he was buried in his Dracula cape, right? That was how much he was Dracula. That literally a guy who slept in his coffin and then came out at night was his eternal sleep in a coffin is in that Dracula cape. I think it's amazing. And I think that we kind of miss that element of acting quite a bit today's day and age. I'm not talking about these people becoming the character. They're not. They are. He was Dracula. That's why he becomes the outline for every Dracula since. Boris Karloff was the Frankenstein monster, and that's why he was the outline, the architect in a sense of all the Frankensteins that come afterwards. And we can go on and on and on. That's what made these actors so great. And these actresses, we're talking about Jamie Lee Curtis and her mom, Janet Leigh. They became the original scream queens because the reality that they were living in. If you listen to interviews with Janet Leigh talking about Psycho and that shower scene, which is so famous, how freaked out she was, because it was so real. Or, Jamie Lee Curtis, like I said, you see it in the eyes with the picture I showed from The Fog. They live these situations, right? And that's what makes it work. The more you live it, the more it's real. It's going to reflect in the eyes, and that reflects to the audience, and then it just takes over. The dialogue follows, the behavior follows, everything follows, and that's what you have to trust, right? That's the challenge, but that's what you have to trust. And if you can get to that point, you're going to be a pretty damn good actor. If you can, it's going to be tough. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully this gives you some movies to watch, but also hopefully it helps you with where you're trying to get with your acting, and that's the goal ultimately is, helping you as actors and actresses push through these roadblocks, these humps that we get into while we're learning, and find a way to push through and get over that, to keep going and keep going and keep going, because that's how you're going to become successful. Have a great weekend. I will see you next week with our last 5. Like I said, watch the movies, drop a comment, drop a like, a follow, get your friends following, get people involved, and we'll see you next week.